The legacy of the past presents a daunting challenge for the new government. I followed and been encouraged by the speeches of the President over the past few months, in which he has publicly recognized the shared pain and grief of individuals from all communities. It is important to build on this momentum and to translate it into tangible results so that the truth of what happened to loved ones is unearthed. Acknowledgement and truth-telling are important steps towards healing and closure, as are justice, reparation, and non-recurrence. Sri Lanka has struggled to move forward with domestic accountability mechanisms that are credible and have the trust and confidence of the victims. This is why Sri Lankans have looked outside for justice through assistance at the international level. Ultimately, it's the state's responsibility, and it is important that this process is nationally owned, and it can be complemented and supported by international means. My own office has been mandated to gather and preserve information and analyze violations and abuses, and has established a dedicated project for this purpose. I hope that it can support future accountability efforts, both here in Sri Lanka and internationally. The government has reopened investigations and prosecutions into some important cases, including the Easter Sunday attacks, and I encourage that these be advanced. Achieving results in at least some long-standing and representative human rights cases would have a powerful, demonstrative and confidence-building effect. Today we also mark the International Day of Victims of Torture. Torture and sexual violence featured prominently during the conflict and are still reported today. Even though torture is criminalized under Sri Lankan law, complaints continue to be received of torture across the country. Therefore, security sector and police reform are critical, as there is much work to be done to address and end this systemic problem. I would like to also acknowledge the long-standing work of the Sri Lankan Human Rights Commission, with whom we have a strong relationship and partnership over many years, and it has indeed initiated a lot of important work, and especially with the police on custodial deaths. I also understand that a bill proposing decriminalization of same-sex relationships is before Parliament, and I hope it will be passed soon. I also call for the moratorium of the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act and urge an expedited review and release of long-term PTA detainees and prisoners. Also, the Online Safety Act needs to be repealed. Women's and gender rights in Sri Lanka have seen both progress and persistent challenges in recent years. In the November 24 elections, 22 women were elected to Parliament, doubling female participation to 9.8%, which is higher than in the past. But obviously, we need more, and we need the representation of women in public and political life. In the workplace, women still earn 27% less than men for the same job, but also we have heard from women how much they feel that they need to be much stronger in public life, and that their very specific concerns are addressed fully. The Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act also needs to be amended to bring it into line with international human rights law. In 2022, Sri Lankans, particularly the most vulnerable, were hit by the worst economic crisis in living memory. I was particularly distressed to hear accounts of the extreme hardship faced by those working on plantations. And it is important that their needs, including access to land, to housing, to improved wages, are met. Popular demands arising from the 2022 Aragalia protests called for action on accountability for corruption and economic mismanagement, and I'm encouraged by the work the government is doing in this regard, and I hope that this wave of hope and change carries forward. this can be the basis for a new social contract. There is indeed an opportunity even to transition to a human rights economy, one that looks beyond economics and focuses also on the main causes of societal problems and addresses issues such as inequality, injustice, and unsustainable practices from the past. During my meetings with religious leaders, I stress the pivotal role that they have in promoting human rights and interfaith understanding. This is a key ingredient for a peaceful, harmonious, and ethical society in a world where hate speech and incitement on religious grounds are becoming increasingly commonplace, and this is a phenomenon that we see unfortunately all around the world. I urge the religious leader of this country to use their influence to stamp this out. The new government has set a fundamental goal of national unity. Quick wins and confidence-building measures are key to enhancing trust and reconciliation, and my office remains ready to assist and provide assistance in this regard. I leave here with a strong hope that there is a palpable desire, both in the government and in society, to draw a line under the entrenched identity politics of ethnicity, religion, language, culture, caste, and class. In a world where wars, economic uncertainty, and human rights violations are sadly becoming the norm, my wish is that Sri Lanka can become a story of hope, and I look forward to a constructive engagement with the government. Indeed, Sri Lanka can become an example of peaceful coexistence, of understanding the other, of tolerance, of recognition of differences, while at the same time embracing diversity and seeing it, diversity, as a richness and a strength of this country's rich tapestry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, High Commissioner. We will take questions. Just to let you know, this is we are running on a really tight schedule, as you may have gathered, because we were running so late. If you could identify yourselves, who you and who you work for, the organisation. We'll take 3 questions at a time. Okay. First question. Over to you. Yes.
Sri Lanka. Thank you so much. Majority of the previous governments of Sri Lanka did not extend their support for the resolutions drafted by the UNHRC as well as the OHCHR regarding the human rights violations that took place in the country. And Sri Lanka has always been rooting for the internal mechanism to cater to these human rights violations. Now, as the Human Rights Commissioner, are you satisfied with this internal mechanism that is currently there to solve these issues? Or do you think the international involvement is necessary in responding to these human rights violations in Sri Lanka? That is my first question. And my second question is, Sri Lanka has been going through many crisis after crisis actually, and the most severe of it was the economic crisis that we faced a few years ago. And citizens of the country were stripped of their basic human rights, I would say, including health facilities, food, and etc. And the UN Human Rights Commission is very involved in these past events of the country. But do you think, is there a way forward through the Human Rights Commission, and do you also what are your suggestions for the way forward as well?
Okay, thank you. On this side of the room, sorry, here at the front with the sunglasses. Yes, please, and please do remember to introduce your name and the news organisation you work for.
Thank you, High Commissioner. This is Meera Srinivasan. I report for the Hindu newspaper in India. Speaking in Colombo a couple of days ago, you said that the credibility of international law is being undermined by shocking human rights violations and by weak and inconsistent advocacy for respect of the law by states, I quote. So we see powerful states today openly backing Israel as it continues killing Palestinians, including people waiting to collect food aid in Gaza. And in this context, how do you think your office can engage with small states like Sri Lanka, which is apparently caught between domestic mechanisms that victims say are lacking in credibility and an international order that is evidently power-based and not rules-based and is unable to defend humanitarian norms? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And further at the back, yes?
Thank you. Amal Jayasinha, France Press. Actually, following up on Meera's question, High Commissioner, about 10 days ago, you said that you condemned in very strong language about what's going on in Gaza, and you condemned both Israel and Hamas. Since your statement 10 days ago, the number of daily killings have actually escalated. So I'd like your reaction to what's going on right now. Thank you.
The first one, the question that you asked about domestic accountability mechanisms and international concern. It is important that domestic accountability mechanisms are actually functioning, and this was part of the discussions that we have had with the government, precisely, for example, how to create independent prosecutor, how to build up a domestic accountability system. And what I offered is precisely not only to support this, but also to make sure that it is informed by international practices that we have from around the world to build up accountability mechanisms that respond to the needs and aspirations and expectations of the victims. And it has to be always very victim-centered. And that's a process that is currently ongoing within the country. It, of course, human rights always remain a matter of international concern, not just here in Sri Lanka, but everywhere else in the world as well. On your second issue, economic crisis obviously has hit Sri Lanka enormously. I remember in 2022 when we followed the events. And for me, human rights is also an issue that needs to look at economic issues. Of course, we have, because we don't only have civil and political rights, we also have economic, social, and cultural rights. And economic and social and cultural rights are very often the backbone of economic systems, of fiscal decisions that are taken. So it is important to enhance the understanding that economics and the way the economies work are informed by human rights obligations that the state has. And that's why we launched this concept of a human rights economy, which again also wants to address not only domestic issues but also, frankly, inequities within the international financial system, because we see that very often austerity measures are not looked at from the perspective of human rights, for example. And we really want to start this discussion that in the future the international financial architecture is looked at also from the equity issue when it comes to human rights. So, small states, I come from a small state, Austria. When I studied law, it was very important to understand that international law is the biggest trump card that we have as a small state, or as a smaller state. My own country is 8 million. I know Sri Lanka is about 22 million. International law means that there are rules that need to be respected by everyone, including by the powerful ones. And the beauty of the United Nations is that there is no such thing as a small state. And it is precisely because of international law and international regulations that we are able to cooperate with each other. And I fear in today's world, to be very honest, when I look around, that the old habit of might is right comes back. And it is very important to remember why we have not only the United Nations Charter, but also what the advantages are of this Charter, including what it gave birth to, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is fundamentally about how societies not only work within them, among themselves, but also how they interact with each other. And this has incredible positive and influences every life. Without international law, we wouldn't be able to travel, we wouldn't be able to trade, we wouldn't be able to do so many things. So that's why it's important that there is a new realization of the importance of multilateralism and the United Nations. And indeed, small states really depend on it more than perhaps some of the powerful states. But also powerful states depend on it. They may not know it at a certain point in time, but of course they also depend on how to regulate international relations in an amicable way. Look, I've been absolutely clear about the situation in Gaza, and we have, in fact, earlier this week, we can share this with you, we have about now, as of the 25th of June, we have actually 598 reportedly killed in total as a result of them trying to access the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I mean the distribution points that are installed within Gaza. And I have to say, when it comes, it's heartbreaking to know that people who need humanitarian assistance almost risk their lives in order to get food or material assistance. And it's really extremely distressing to see that militarized humanitarian assistance schemes have emerged. They are not a response. What we need, again, is a ceasefire, release of hostages, and an all-out effort to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
Thank you. Yes, I'll take a question from you. Remember to identify yourself.
Yeah, I have two questions for you. I'm Faisal Shahid from the Sunday Morning. And the two questions, I'll keep it short and simple. The first one is on the PTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act. You hadn't discussed it during your briefing here. But I would like to know, because the government has repeatedly stated that they want to abolish it or replace it. But we've seen in the past 6 months that more and more arrests have happened. And there's no, even though there's claims of amendments and talks of repealing it, there really hasn't been much development coming from the government. So in respect of that, I would like to know your views and what your investigation of that is. And secondly, you also said that police reforms are necessary. So I would like to know what reforms you're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and we'll go this side of the room now. Thank you. Yeah.
Sri Lanka has consistently...
Can you identify yourself, please? Sorry.
Tharushi Veerasinghe from the Sunday Times. So Sri Lanka has consistently opposed the Council's accountability project so far, yeah? And with what's happening in Gaza and Israel as well, why should Sri Lankans feel confidence in, the ability of extraterritorial and universal jurisdiction to actually contribute to the long-term stability and reconciliation of, what we are recovering from here? And also with regards to your previous report, High Commissioner, in 2024, when you called for asset freezing and other sanctions in relation to Sri Lanka's human rights violations, are these recommendations you will be making again in this year's report?
Okay. And we'll take a question from you. Yes.
Good evening. High Commissioner, I'm Indivari from Derana. A few follow-up questions, specifically whether steps have been discussed, specific steps to push the government to take in the coming months to turn investigative reports into actual progress, and whether there are specific time-bound benchmarks you've urged the Sri Lankan government during your discussions, and what the face of Sri Lanka's engagements with the UNHRC will be with the new government.
These are the three, right? Yeah. Look, yes, we obviously discussed the PTA, and it's clear from our perspective that it should be repealed, and we were informed about the steps that are being taken to that effect. But yes, for us the position is very clear on the PTA, and it has been also part of previous reporting from my office. On police reform, no, I mentioned one issue, torture. And, many countries around the world struggle with it. It requires a very consistent effort of independent mechanism of complaint so that people can come forward when they are confronted with it. I mean, it also, as I mentioned, we have a very strong relationship with the National Human Rights Commission here, and they have a lot of expertise when it comes to this. And these are the type of mechanisms that need to be strengthened so that they are part and parcel of, for instance, security sector reform and in particular the police. On accountability, I mean, as I mentioned before, the domestic accountability mechanism is absolutely critical, and it needs to be worked through, and through the strengthening of the institutions that exist, but also by making sure that justice is served when indeed all the evidence is provided. We will always need the support from the international community for this, as long as we need to complement it with the efforts of the international community and the support of the international community to build up such a mechanism. I mean, we're still drafting the report, so I cannot tell you yet what type of recommendations there will be contained. Certainly this visit is very important. It has been very important to directly see myself and visit the country and have this very in-depth engagement with everyone in this country. And I mentioned it in my opening remarks, there are a number of emblematic cases. We have followed them for years, and it is important that progress is made. And obviously, this was part of the discussion that we have had with the authorities. And we will obviously follow up on those as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. Thank you, everyone. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. We've got to race to the airport. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you being here, and have a good evening.
This is another Derana live event.